if how she felt regarding that.
There's really no dismissal with prejudice. It's just simply, it's been dismissed. And she has enough evidence, she can refile. So I don't think this board has any mechanism which is dismissed with or without prejudice. It's simply dismissed. I think any citizen is allowed to come back if they have the proper evidence to suggest that there's been a violation of the ethics code, they can refile. I'll look at it, and if it's a violation, then I'll bring it to the board. If it's not, I'll advise the same. If it's not. But they have the option to refile it.
Right.
Additionally, I don't know if everybody present today recalls the substance of the complaint was she felt she was eligible for a program
Right.
and she wasn't approved for it. It's a heartbreaking situation. I empathize with her,
Right.
but there was just really no evidence that anybody that works for the county did anything wrong. I will say, while we're on the topic of Ms. Smith, we received an email yesterday that a FOIA request came in from the local media for a copy of a letter that she sent to the board. Was it May 5th, Ms. Spivey?
May 29th. March 29th was a mention on a letter date.
March 29th.
Our March 29th letter, or
Well,
March 29th email was what mentioned in the from the
yeah,
newspaper.
and then I had mentioned, I said, well, we should put that on for discussion at the meeting tomorrow. And then I learned from counsel's office for the commission that they handle, that Ms. Johnson handles FOIA requests. Can we pin down the date of that letter that was in that email? I don't have a computer with me.
Okay, I will look it up.
It was one of the most recent, I think it was the last one that was sent out concerning this meeting. So it'd be yesterday, maybe midday,
March 29th.
March 29th. And was that her original complaint, Mr. Longstreet? That
No.
was just one of many
One
follow-up?
of many one of many emails. She said, I think her initial communication started around March 14th, March
Uh-huh.
15th.
I know that one of them was really a blistering email where she said that she wanted to complain. She had concerns about everybody that works in this building. And she was pretty upset. So apparently somehow the media got a hold of it. I don't want to presume anything, but most likely from her. So they're going to take a look at it. And with this letter that Mr. Longstreet sent on May 1st, somebody will probably turn that letter over to the media as well, if that hasn't already been done. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sorry. All right, any other questions or comments regarding item number 2, the update on the matters relating to Sylvia Smith? If not, we'll move on to new business. Item number 1, communication dated April 28th, 2023 from Cynthia Riley, a violation of section 40-4, conflict of interest of the ethics ordinance. This is attached to our agenda package for today. I trust everybody has had an opportunity to look at it. Could we begin, Mr. Longstreet, with you giving us your impression of the complaint that has been filed by Ms. Riley?
Very well. This is a formal complaint from Ms. Cynthia Riley against the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office and Mahmoud Awad, who is an assistant Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. I got information to believe this morning that Mr. Awad is in the Extradition's Freedom of Information Act request department. So he is in control of the FOIA request. However, the question is when he became in control of the FOIA request. The complaint alleges that Mr. Awad's wife, who is an attorney, was filing alleged frivolous lawsuits against the complainant. And that at a certain point, the lawsuit was either dismissed or they lost the lawsuit, that there was a FOIA request in reference to Ms. Awad's criminal history, that there was an allegation that the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office charged an unreasonable rate to receive the FOIA information, and that Mr. Awad was directly involved in the FOIA request and directly involved in overcharging for the documents requested through FOIA. This morning, I thought Mr. Awad was a Wayne County Prosecutor's Office in the Orange. I thought that Mr. Awad was an attorney who was working in the warrants division. However, this morning I contacted the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office and I learned that he is in the extradition FOIA department. However, the question is, it could possibly be a violation of the Wayne County Ethics Code through the issue of a conflict of interest because it is a person that he has direct family contact with. It is a subject in which he would have an interest in. But I need to find out when he became in control of the FOIA request, because this is dated December 2020. This is now 2023. He may not have had that position. I believed it was Miss Susan Twill who was in control of the FOIA or Freedom Information Act department at that time. So if she was the person who was controlling that department at the time, it would not be a violation of the Wayne County Ethics Code. So we need to determine when he became in control of FOIA.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Longstreet? Comments? Any matters for discussion?
There is one more thing I want to let the board know. There is a letter that was sent that the complainant provided some information, and the person that is at this time responding to the FOIA request is Ms. Susie Twill, principal attorney with the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. And I believe for a long time, she was running, and it's a one-man department, and she was the person who was running that for years. So this might have been a recent or new change, but I don't know if Mr. AY was in control of that department at the time. I don't believe he was, but I'd like to verify that.
Any questions, any discussion regarding Ms. Riley's complaint and the comments that Mr. Longstreet made?
No, he cleared up without my thoughts.
Well, you know, something that troubled me about it is my office, we issue FOIA requests. As far as I know, the response to those requests aren't discretionary, and the amount that's charged is set by the agency that received the request. I think that what my concern would be is in the event that Mr. Awad did work in the department that handles FOIA requests, I don't know that there would necessarily be a conflict of interest if he were somehow involved in that. I'm just not sure, and I want to go on record as saying that. What type of information would you want to get other than from the prosecutor's office to determine when Mr. Awad became engaged in the FOIA department? Any other information from the complainant?
Good question. I don't believe so. I don't believe so. I don't think I would need any more information. I would think at this point, would it be a conflict of interest for Mr. AY to be in control of a FOIA request that directly involves his wife? And he is the one that has the discretion to determine what to charge, how much to charge, even if it's set. There should be some separation between, if it's a FOIA request involving his wife, it should be some separation where he needs to step back and say, I can't touch this one, someone else handle it. Then it wouldn't be in conflict of interest. But if he has his hands on it himself, or he's directly supervising a person who has their hands on it and he's aware of it, then I think it could call into question some issues. I think we always need to avoid the appearance of impropriety. That is the appearance of impropriety. So I think it's something we need to look at further. Even though I'm leaning towards this not being a violation of the Wayne County Ethics Code, I think we do need to take the time to figure out whether he was in control of it. And at minimum, if it's not a violation of the ethics code, we need to tell him he needs to avoid the appearance of impropriety and separate himself from these issues when it involves his wife.
Well, I agree with that. And where I was going with this, I'm not sure that this isn't a situation where we should request an answer from Mr. Awad. Let's find out from him what I'm just suggesting this. I'm not making a motion at this time. Might this be a situation where Mr. Longstreet could make a call here or there to find out through his contacts who's running the department at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office that's in charge of FOIA requests? But I'm wondering if we shouldn't get an answer from him. She filed this complaint. What we've heard our counsel say is that there may be evidence of a conflict of interest. I'd like to discuss whether this is a situation where we want to get an answer from him. We want to find out what his involvement was. If any, maybe he didn't have any involvement. Maybe he did disqualify himself from it. Anybody want to discuss that, or anybody want to make a motion?
Well, I can agree with that, what you're saying. If he was in the department, could have been something that came under his purview. And if he didn't disqualify himself, then it will be, like I said, a conflict. So we need to have that answer before we say there was no violation.
So are you making a motion then
And that
that we ask him to answer this complaint and also have Mr. Longstreet do his investigation?
motion, yeah, that Mr. Longstreet do his diligence, and then we ask the questions of Mr. Wide about his participation in that event.
Well, I think the way the questions would work would be, he'd get a copy of the complaint, and then Mr. Longstreet might do a cover letter narrowing down the issues that the board would want Mr. Awad to answer to. And I think one would be, did you work in that department? When were you assigned to that department? And did you have anything at all to do with this FOIA request that was submitted by Ms. Riley?
And maybe a secondary issue to that is, were there any harm, like not only just the FOIA request, but what is the other harm? You know, with the information that's gathered, I feel there's any incorrect information, or if there's any harm that's associated with the information. So that would go to the complainant if there's any additional, other than, you know, conflict of interest. Is there any other problems with the information gathered?
That's a great point, Dr. Ford. You know, another thing that we might want to ask about, she's complaining. She says that the amount of money her and her husband were charged was exorbitant. As I know, FOIA requests, agencies like the prosecutor's office or a court, well, courts don't respond to FOIA requests, but agencies that do, they have a set amount of money, you know, 75 cents a page, $1.25 a page. I think we could cover that in our letter to Mr. Watt. Who sets the rate? Who set that rate? And who made a determination that there was going to be a 50% deposit required? That could all be handled in about 5 or 6 questions.
Okay.
Question
Yes,
or a statement. As I read this, it appears that's the only question, whether or not she was charged more than what she should have been charged, period. That's the only question.
well, she
Because
charges,
that's her complaint. I was charged, I'm not sure that I was charged an exorbitant amount.
Too much.
Well, perhaps Mr. Longstreet can then find out who set this amount, you know, what their calculation was. There's a worksheet on it. You know, we can respond back to Ms. Smith and say, we investigated it and here's our findings.
well, if we ask him to respond to the complaint, as Dr. Carnell pointed out, she made a good point. They're complaining about the amount of money. That's something that he'd have to answer to. Maybe what he could say is, I don't have anything to do with that. The prosecutor's office sets that amount. So is there a second to Mr. Wood's motion? Or does anybody want to modify it, or do you want to modify your motion, Mr. Woods? We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second, or do we have proposed changes to the motion?
I second the motion. I think Mr. Longstreet has sufficient guidance from the commission now to know what his mission is, and we'll just go from there and wait for your report at the next meeting.
Yeah. How long will you give him? Will you give him pretty much a month, maybe a week before the next meeting in June to respond?
I
He
was,
has 21 days, I think.
he does, and I would probably have that letter. He has 28, I believe. And I would have that letter out by the end of the week. So we should have it by the next meeting, his response.
Okay.
at minimum.
All right. Anybody want to second?
So it sounds like it's two parts of that motion, or whether or not he was employed as in charge of that department at that time,
Yes,
and whether or not, what is the criteria for setting the amount?
that's correct. Because I think it's a dual question in regards to whether he had control over it, whether he had anything to do with the issuing of the FOIA request, which is a conflict of interest because the conflict of interest that it directly involves his wife.
Absolutely.
That's the conflict to me, along with the money. So the real conflict is if it's your wife, man, back off.
We have a motion on the floor. What's
I think you
everyone's?
seconded the motion.
You seconded the motion?
I did.
Okay,
You did.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No opposed, motion passes. Mr. Longstreet, I think if you got the letter out right away, I think he would have 28 days to get a response in prior to the next meeting.
Yes, sir.
And our next meeting is on the 21st of June. All right, moving down the agenda, item E, such other matters as may be properly submitted before the board. Any matters that anybody wants to bring up that weren't on the agenda?
Well, yeah, I want to bring up I did the conference yesterday, and it was such a short notice that we were in Boston. Oh, I'm sorry. It's about the short notice for the conference yesterday.
Well, I tell
I
you
went
the
back to
truth.
my calendar and I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah. To be really candid with you, Mr. Woods, we did get notice of that date, but it was months ago. I'm thinking it might have been back in the winter when the individual that was in charge of that conference came before us
Okay.
and invited us. But like you, I never, until that email came out within the last 3 or 4 business days, I had no recollection and I didn't have it on my calendar, but I will say this. We have somebody here with us today,
Okay.
Mr. Longstreet, who attended the conference and who could give us a report on what he learned.
I did attend the conference yesterday. It was a quite enlightening conference. I walked away with more skill than I had when I walked in the door. That's for sure. The crux of the conference was really just the strengthening and building of stronger ethics boards. There was the first to start out with a roundtable discussion amongst several members of the community from Birmingham, East Point, Macomb County, Lansing, all talking about the effectiveness of the ethics boards, how we can make the ethics board stronger, giving the ethics board more teeth, how we can try to get politics out of ethics decisions, how at the ethics board politics, the effects of financing in the ethics board, how effective we are in investigation, how effective we are in enforcement. It continued on with a very, very thorough discussion of parliamentary procedure. We talked with someone from the Detroit Police Department, parliamentarian who had a thorough discussion about parliamentary procedure, the Robert's Rules of Order, and the Open Meetings Act. I came away with a lot more knowledge about parliamentary procedure than I ever had before, even though I've had a lot of experience both through my fraternity and other community service organizations where I've dealt with the Robert's Rules of Order. In that day, I learned more yesterday than I did in 20 years of actually doing it myself. It further went on in regards to discussion about the Opens Meeting Act. We had a expert from, I do believe he was former Northville mayor, who came in and gave us a thorough discussion about the Opens Meeting Act and how these meetings have to be conducted and the proper rules for conducting those meetings, and everything that the bullet points we really need to know in regards to the Open Meetings Act and its proper procedure. The conference ended with a discussion in investigation, discussing investigation techniques that the Detroit Ethics Board has a actual investigator who one said we learned that they have just about 85 ethics complaints every single year, which I found astonishing, seeing as how Wayne County is almost twice as large in population. However, we only get 6 or 7 ethics complaints a year where they're getting 85. We found it quite interesting. We also discussed the lack of public knowledge about what the ethics board to do and Detroit Ethics Board's effort to get out PSAs in regards to their ethics board, what they do and their availability for citizens to file complaints. And I thought that I came away thinking, okay, maybe the Wayne County Ethics Board needs to do the same thing. We could probably get a whole lot more complaints and get a lot more done if people really knew who we are and what we're doing and that we're here. We may get more complaints and probably solve more issues if that was the case. But back into the discussion of investigation, there was a investigator from the Detroit Ethics Board who gave us a thorough discussion about her ethics investigation, how she does investigations and the tools that she uses. Overall, I signed up. I found out about it about 7 o'clock on the 14th. That there was a conference on the 15th. So I signed up and I was there that next morning. But I'm glad I took the time to go through this meeting because it was truly informative. It made me a better lawyer for you guys because I learned a lot of stuff I didn't know, and I'm able to guide after attending that conference. I'm able to guide you guys better and making this a very effective and powerful ethics board, even with the limited power that we have. And we're going to do as much as we can with it.
Mr. Longstreet, could I ask you a question? You may not know the answer. Was this recorded? Was the conference recorded?
It was not.
Oh, it was not.
It was not.
Did they have any handouts from the individual?
Yes, they did.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what I would request, if you have any handouts regarding that section on Robert's Rules of Order. Okay, and if you have any handouts regarding the investigator
She
and
didn't
her
have a handout.
presentation, she didn't have a
She didn't
handout?
have a handout.
Well, then let me leave it open to you. Any handouts that you feel would be beneficial for the board members, I would love to see them. I'd like an opportunity. I'm familiar with the Robert's Rules of Order, but probably not as familiar with it as that individual that gave the presentation. I would appreciate you circulating that.
I would think you might want to just invite her here, have her come talk to the board. Because it was a very informative
What was her name?
conversation.
What was her name?
Miss Frances Jackson. Yes.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Longstreet, you're our counsel. Did you meet her yesterday?
Yes, I did. I met everybody yesterday.
Okay, what would you extend that invitation? We'll have to set up a date, and we'll want to set up a date in advance when we believe we're going to have a quorum and we're going to have a lot of people present. And if we're going to have a lot of members present, let's try to get her in. Maybe the June meeting might be too fast, but talk to her, see what her schedule is
Okay.
for early summer, June, July, August, something along those lines. Anything else you want to share with the board regarding the conference?
Any questions?
No.
All right.
Thorough, in my view, you covered a lot.
Sound like we were at the conference. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Our Rules of Roberts expert here. All right, well, I guess now Miss
So
Spike.
Miss Parisian was there too. If you have anything to add, she was sitting right next to me the whole time. So, and she took extremely
Miss
thorough
Parisian,
notes
come
that I
on.
didn't take.
You're in the house.
Hold out on us.
Yeah.
Good morning again to this honorable
that's
body,
fine.
Mary
Thank you,
Parisian,
Jackie.
Assistant Commission Counsel. Yes, I had the pleasure of sitting next to Attorney Longstreet during the conference. And there was something I thought was pertinent to this body. And the first roundtable was in regards to amending ethics ordinances. And we had a panel of individuals from different communities who came and discussed how it is very difficult for them to amend their ordinance so that it has more teeth and they have more enforcement. That seems to be a common issue across the board. And the second issue too was working with the governing body and how long the process takes. And I say that because I know that's something that is pertinent to this body at this moment in time. So from my understanding with Macomb County, it took quite some time for them to work with their Board of Commissioners and come back and forth to negotiate and collaborate to get their ordinance where they needed it to be.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, if there's no other, yes.
We have Director Pam. She wants to make a comment.
Oh, okay, yes.
Hi, I just wanted to note that your June meeting is scheduled for the 21st. Committees will be meeting in this room on that day at 10 o'clock and your meeting starts at 9 o'clock.
9:30, actually.
Oh, 9:30, committees will be meeting in this room, beginning at 9:30. So we have a couple of options. We can change the date that you meet, or you can meet in the chambers on that day.
I personally, everybody can address this. I think it would be a bad idea to change the date. We have trouble getting quorums together. That's why we give the dates out so far in advance so everybody can plan them. And I will tell you right now, my month of June is booked up, and if I had to move it, I don't know if I could. Would we have an option of using that room down in the basement?
Oh, absolutely. I said that was your second option. We can use the chambers.
Well, I don't want to make that decision. I'll leave that to everybody. Does everybody feel that it would be acceptable to meet down the basement? Or maybe we could send the other group down the basement. I'm joking. I'm joking. Don't carry that back. Would anybody have a?
Go in the basement. Let's go in the basement.
Let's go in the basement.
Okay, so you'll meet in the chambers on the 21st.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing that to our attention. I think we're finished with our agenda, and now we're on item F on page 2, Ms. Spivey, public comments. Do we have any?
No emails have been received and all lines have been prompted to unmute. I don't see any hands raised for public comments.
Well, if there's no public comment, let's move on to item G, adjournment. Anybody want to make a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Any second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
All right.
Do we want them on?